They said she owed them. Ruby's voice, a bare whisper, cut right through the November chill. Owed what one exactly? Didn't matter. The men were thorough. I saw the mess they left. Angela, broken, bleeding. Those twins. They ran. That's when they found me. I shouldn't have answered the door. Now I'm in it. Deep. But get this. The sharks, the thugs who did this, they underestimated Angela's girls. Didn't see the steel in those little eyes. They're about to learn a lesson. A hard one. Her kindness. It's a loaded gun. They have no idea how her quiet compassion will change everything. A single dad drowning in guilt, a desperate mother left for dead, and two little girls who refused to give up on hope. By the end of that night, Elijah wouldn't just save their lives, they'd save his too. Before we continue, please tell us, where in the world are you tuning in from? We love seeing how far our stories travel. Bang, bang, bang. The sound cut through the rain and the flickering television like a gunshot. Elijah Reed's head snapped toward the front door of his small house on Sycamore Grove. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night. Nobody came here anymore. Not at this hour. Not ever, really. Bang, bang, bang. More urgent, desperate. Elijah hauled himself off the couch, his body stiff from hours of sitting in the same position. The untouched dinner plate on the coffee table had gone cold long ago. He moved toward the door cautiously, every instinct telling him this wasn't right. Through the peephole, what he saw made his heart lurch into his throat. Two small girls, identical twins, no more than 8 years old, soaking wet in thin pajamas, no shoes, no coats, shivering violently in the October rain, their small faces twisted in absolute terror. Elijah yanked the door open. "Please," one of the girls screamed immediately, her voice breaking. They beaten my mama. She's dying. Please, mister, you gotta help." The other twin was sobbing too hard to speak. Water streamed from their hair, their bare feet leaving wet prints on his porch. For a moment, Elijah's mind went blank. Then something inside him, something that had been dormant for months, roared to life. "Come inside. Come inside right now," he urged, ushering them into his living room. They were absolutely drenched, shaking so hard their teeth chattered like castanets. He grabbed the throw blanket from his couch and wrapped it around both of them, his hands moving on autopilot. "Where's your mother? What happened?" Elijah asked urgently, already grabbing his car keys and jacket from the hook by the door. The old building, the one with the broken windows on Ashford Street, the factory place. They found where Mama was hiding. The men said she owed money." The other twin interrupted, tears streaming down her face. "They started hitting her and hitting her. She screamed at us to run and get help." Elijah knew exactly where they meant, the abandoned textile factory about 4 blocks away. A skeletal structure that had been rotting there since the automotive industry collapsed, taking half of Cleveland's jobs with it. Close enough that 2 terrified children could run to the nearest trouse with lights on. His house, his door, him. "Listen to me very carefully," Elijah said, kneeling down to eye level with both girls. His voice was firm but gentle, the way he used to talk when he pushed the thought away. "I need you to stay here. Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone except me or the police. Do you understand?" Both girls nodded, their eyes wide and glistening with fear. "What are your names?" he asked quickly. "I'm Nora. This is Ruby." "Nora. Ruby, I'm Elijah. I'm going to get your mama, I promise you that." He stood up, his 42-year-old knees protesting, and ran to his truck. The rain hammered against the windshield as he sped toward Ashford Street, fumbling with his phone. His hands were shaking. From adrenaline or something else? He couldn't tell. 911. "What's your emergency?" "There's a woman being attacked at the old textile factory on Ashford Street. 2 little girls came to my house. Said men were beating their mother." "I'm heading there now. Sir, please don't approach the scene. Wait for officers to—" "I'm not waiting." He gave the dispatcher his name and the address where the twins were, then ended the call, ignoring her protests. His heart was pounding harder than it had in 3 months, harder than it had since Number Focus. The factory loomed ahead like something out of a nightmare, all broken windows and crumbling brick. He killed his headlights and approached on foot, the rain soaking through his jacket immediately. The main entrance was just a gaping hole where a door had once hung. "Hello," he called out, his voice swallowed by the sound of rain hammering the metal roof. "Ma'am, are you in here?" A weak moan answered him from somewhere deep inside the building. Elijah pulled out his phone, using its flashlight to navigate through the debris. The beam swept across overturned crates, broken bottles, scattered belongings, a child's backpack, women's clothing, a camping lantern lying on its side. Someone had been living here. Then he saw her. A woman lay crumpled on the concrete floor near what had once been a loading dock. Her body curled protectively around herself. Her face was a mass of bruises and blood. Her meager possessions were scattered everywhere, as if the attackers had torn through them, looking for money that wasn't there. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Elijah dropped to his knees beside her, his hands shaking. "Blood, so much blood. Your daughters, Nora and Ruby, they came to my house. They're safe. Help is coming." Her swollen eyes flickered open, just barely. "My babies," the words came out through split lips. "They're safe," Elijah repeated, carefully assessing her injuries without moving her. He'd done basic first aid training at the auto shop where he worked. Broken ribs, definitely. He could tell by the shallow, pained way she was breathing. Facial trauma, possibly internal injuries. Moving her could make things worse. "The men," she whispered. "They left maybe 10 minutes ago when they heard sirens in the distance." Sirens? Elijah heard them now too, getting closer. Relief flooded through him. "What's your name?" he asked, taking off his jacket to cover her shivering body. "Angela Torres." "Angela, I'm Elijah. You're going to be okay. Your girls, they were so brave. They ran through the rain in bare feet to find help. You raised them right." A tear slid down her battered cheek, cutting a clean line through the blood and dirt. Within minutes, the factory was flooded with red and blue lights. Police officers and paramedics rushed in, the radios crackling. Elijah stepped back, letting them work, his hands still shaking as he gave his statement to a female officer with kind eyes and a nameplate that read, "Sergeant Hayes." "The girls!" Angela called out weakly as EMTs stabilized her and loaded her onto a stretcher. "Please, my girls, where are my girls?" "They're at my house," Elijah told her. "They're safe, I promise." "We'll send Child Protective Services to your address," Sergeant Hayes said quietly. "Someone needs to stay with them tonight." "You did good, Mr. Reed." Elijah ran back to his truck and drove home, his mind racing. The adrenaline was starting to fade, replaced by something he couldn't quite name. When he pulled into his driveway on Sycamore Grove, he could see both twins pressed against his living room window, their small faces illuminated by the lamp inside. The moment he opened the door, they rushed to him. "Did you find Mama?" Nora cried, grabbing his arm. "Is she alive? Please say she's alive." Ruby's voice cracked with desperation. "She's alive," Elijah said, and the relief that washed over their faces nearly broke him. He knelt down and they both threw their arms around him. "She's hurt, but the ambulance took her to Metro Hospital. The doctors are going to take care of her." Both girls dissolved into tears, clinging to this stranger who'd become their lifeline in one terrible night. Over the next hour, Alicia's small house on Sycamore Grove became command central. Police came and went. A social worker arrived, a kind-faced woman named Brenda Hayes, who introduced herself with a gentle smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Through halting, overlapping sentences from the twins, the story came out in pieces. Their mother worked as a housekeeper at the Marriott downtown. 6 months ago, Nora had gotten very sick, a severe infection that landed her in the hospital for 2 weeks. The insurance barely covered anything. The bills kept coming. "Mama cried a lot," Ruby said quietly, wrapped in the blanket on Elijah's couch. "She tried to hide it, but we hurt her at night." Desperate and terrified, Angela had borrowed money from the wrong people, men who didn't care about payment plans or hardship, men who charged interest that doubled every month, men who made threats. "They kept coming to our old apartment," Nora explained, her voice small. "They'd bang on the door and yell. They said Mama owed them $8,000 now, but she only borrowed $3,000. 2 weeks ago, Angela had packed their few belongings in the middle of the night. They'd been hiding in the abandoned factory, trying to scrape together enough money to either pay the debt or buy bus tickets to Angela's sister in New Mexico." Mama said we were going on an adventure, Ruby whispered. She said we were camping, but I knew she was scared. Brenda Hayes took notes, her expression carefully neutral. When the twins finished, she looked at Elijah with a question in her eyes. They'll need emergency placement while their mother recovers. I can call a foster family. No, Nora cried out, grabbing Elijah's arm. We want to stay with Mr. Elijah. We can't go with strangers, added both girls, clinging to him like he was life raft in a storm. Elijah felt something crack open in his chest, something that had been sealed shut for 3 months. They can stay with me, he heard himself say. The words came out before he'd fully thought them through. I have room. I'll do whatever background checks you need, but please, they've been through enough tonight. Don't make them go somewhere unfamiliar. Brenda studied him carefully. Her eyes took in the family photos on the walls. Photos of a man who'd once smiled more. Photos of a young boy with gap-toe grin close to the twins' age. She noticed the wedding ring still on Elijah's left hand despite the absence of a wife. She saw the grief etched into every line of his face and the way he'd instinctively positioned himself between the girls and everyone else in the room. I'll need to run a background check, she said finally, but I can expedite it. If everything clears, and I suspect it will, you can serve as an emergency foster placement. I'll need to supervise tonight and do a home visit tomorrow. Whatever you need, Elijah said immediately. The background check came back clean within the hour. Brenda made arrangements to return in the morning, gave Elijah her card, and left him alone with 2 traumatized little girls who'd picked his door out of all the doors on Sycamore Grove. Are you hungry? He asked. They nodded. Elijah made grilled cheese sandwiches. Simple, comforting. He hadn't cooked for anyone in months. The girls ate slowly, exhaustion starting to replace the adrenaline. When they'd finished, he led them upstairs to the spare bedroom, Connor's bedroom. He left it exactly as it was, the dinosaur posters on the walls, the toy cars lined up on the shelf, the twin bed with the blue comforter decorated with planets and stars. For 3 months, Elijah hadn't been able to enter this room without feeling like he was drowning. But tonight, he opened the door. I have some clothes you can change into, he said, his voice rough. He pulled out sweatpants and hoodies from Connor's dresser. They were too big for the girls, but they were warm and soft. The bathroom is right there. Take your time. When Nora and Ruby emerged in Connor's clothes, something in Elijah's expression must have shown because Ruby asked softly, Did these belong to your son? Elijah's breath caught. He nodded. His name was Connor. Where is he? Nora asked. The question hung in the air. Elijah could have deflected. Could have said, Not now. Or, It's complicated. But these girls had trusted him with their truth. They deserved his. He died, Elijah said quietly. 3 months ago, there was an accident during a school field trip. He drowned in a pond. Both twins' eyes went wide. Ruby's hand found Nora's. We're so sorry, Nora whispered. Me too. But I think he'd want you to wear his clothes tonight to be warm and safe. He was a good kid. He would have liked you both. He tucked them into bed, both of them insisting on sleeping in the same twin bed. Despite Elijah's offer to set up the guest room, they needed each other tonight. He understood that. Mr. Elijah, said Ruby as he reached the door. Yeah, thank you for saving our mama. Your mama saved herself by raising daughters brave enough to ask for help. Get some sleep. We'll visit her tomorrow. He left the door cracked open, the hallway light spilling into the room. Then he sat down in the hallway outside Connor's bedroom, his back against the wall, listening to the twins breathe. For the first time in 3 months, the silence of his house didn't feel like it was crushing him. If someone had asked Elijah 6 hours ago if he'd ever feel anything but grief again, he would have said no, would have said the best parts of him died in that pond with his son, would have said he was just going through the motions until his body finally gave up to. But sitting in that hallway, listening to 2 little girls breathe softly in his son's bed, wearing his son's clothes, he felt something else, something small and fragile, like the first green shoot pushing through frozen ground. Purpose. He had something to do tomorrow, someone to take care of, a reason to get up. Elijah didn't sleep that night. He couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Angela's battered face, saw the twins' terrified expressions on his porch, saw Connor's gap-toothed smile. When dawn finally broke over Cleveland, pale and gray, Elijah made breakfast. Pancakes. Connor had loved pancakes. The twins came downstairs still wearing the two big clothes, their hair messy from sleep. They looked so small, so vulnerable. "Can we see Mama today?" Nora asked. "As soon as visiting hours start," Elijah promised. They ate quietly the way to the previous night settling over them. Brenda Hayes arrived at Ninehorn for her home visit, checked the house, asked the girls how they'd slept. "Everything was in order. You're cleared for temporary placement. We'll reassess weekly. Angela's sister in New Mexico has been contacted. She's willing to take all three of them once Angela recovers. But that could be months." "They can stay as long as they need," Elisha said. At 10 hours a.m., they drove to Metro Hospital. The twins were silent in the front seat, holding hands. Elijah could see them in the rearview mirror, their eyes wide and frightened. Angela was in room 412. When they walked in, her face was almost unrecognizable, swollen, bruised in shades of purple and yellow, bandages covering the worst of it. Both her eyes were blackened, her ribs were wrapped, and IV dripped fluids into her arm. But her eyes were clear. When she saw her daughters, she wept. "You're okay," she kept saying, holding their hands as tightly as her injuries allowed. You're okay, my babies. You're okay, we were so scared, Mama. I thought they were going to kill you," Ruby cried. I'm here. You were so brave. So brave." Angela's eyes found Elijah standing near the door, giving them space. Gratitude and shame and relief poured across her battered face. "You saved my life," she said, her voice breaking. "You saved my babies. I don't know how to thank you." "Your daughters saved you," Elijah said gently. "They were incredibly brave. You should be proud. They're staying with you?" Angela asked, almost hoping to hope. "For as long as you need," Elijah assured her. "I've been cleared as emergency foster. They're safe. They will be enrolled in school. They're okay." Angela closed her eyes, tears leaking from the corners. "I made such a mess of everything. I tried so hard to protect them, and I just made it worse. I borrowed from those men because Nora was sick and I was so scared. And now you did what any parent would do." Elijah interrupted firmly. "You protected your child. There's no shame in that." None. Something passed between them in that moment. A recognition, an understanding of what it meant to love a child so completely that you'd risk everything. The police arrested the loan sharks 3 days later. Sergeant Hayes personally came to Elijah's house to deliver the news. They'd found them through connections to other victims, and Angela's testimony given from her hospital bed had sealed the case. "They'll be away for a long time," Hayes said, "and we've connected Angela with victim services. There are funds available to help with medical bills and relocation if needed." But Angela had nowhere to relocate to, not immediately. The hospital kept her for 2 weeks. Her ribs needed time to heal, the facial fractures even longer. Physical therapy for her injuries would take months. A routine developed at the house on Sycamore Grove. Elijah enrolled the twins at Riverside Elementary 3 blocks away, the same school Connor had attended. He thought walking those hallways again would destroy him, but instead, watching Nora and Ruby navigate their first day, nervous but holding hands, he felt that fragile green shoot of purpose grow a little stronger. He packed lunches, turkey sandwiches cut into triangles, apple slices, juice boxes, simple things he hadn't done in months. He helped with homework at the kitchen table, relearning multiplication and reading comprehension. The twins were smart, curious. They asked questions that made him think. He took them to visit their mother every other day. Angela was healing slowly, but she was healing. The bruises faded from purple to green to yellow. She could sit up without gasping. She could smile without her lips splitting. And during those visits, sitting in uncomfortable hospital chairs while the twins chattered about school, Elijah and Angela began to talk. At first, it was just logistics, what the girls liked to eat, their bedtime routines, Ruby's fear of thunderstorms, Nora's love of drawing. But gradually, the conversations deepened. "Tell me about Connor," Angela said. One afternoon, about 3 weeks into her hospital stay, the twins were down in the cafeteria with a volunteer, giving the adults time to talk. "You don't have to if it's too hard, but I see it in your eyes, the grief, and I think maybe talking helps." So Elijah told her about Connor's gap-toothed smile and his obsession with dinosaurs, about how he'd wanted to be a paleontologist when he grew up, about the divorce 2 years ago, amicable enough, split custody, two people who'd grown apart but still loved their son, about the permission slip for the field trip to the nature center, about how Connor had been so excited, bouncing around the house the night before, packing his backpack 3 times to make sure he had everything, about the phone call, the principal's shaking voice, the pond, the paramedics, the hospital where they had pronounced him dead, about his ex-wife Diane screaming at him outside the funeral home that it was his fault that he signed the permission slip that he encouraged Connor to go about, how she'd cut off all contact, moved to another state, and he hadn't heard from her since about the 3 months of sitting alone in his house, staring at walls, barely eating, barely sleeping, barely existing. "I signed the slip," Elijah said, his voice hollow. "I'm the one who—" "No," Angela interrupted firmly. "You're the one who loved your son, who wanted him to have experiences and adventures. You're not the one who let him wander away. You're not the pond. You're not the accident. You're the father who did everything right. And sometimes the world is just cruel." Anyway, Elijah looked at her. This woman he'd found broken on a factory floor, who'd been beaten for the crime of loving her children too much to let one die from lack of medical care. "You understand," he said simply. "I do, because I made a choice too. I borrowed from those men knowing it was dangerous, knowing they were predators. But Nora was in that hospital bed burning with fever, and they said she needed antibiotics that cost $300, and I had 17 in my account. What was I supposed to do? Let her die? Of course not. Then don't blame yourself for signing a permission slip. We both did what parents do. We loved our kids and tried to protect them. The world just got in the way." "Yeah." They sat in silence for a moment, this shared understanding settling between them like a blanket. "Your daughters told me about their father," Elijah said carefully, "that he was not a good man." Angela's jaw tightened. "Marco, we were married for 5 years. He seemed perfect at first, charming, attentive. Then the twins were born and everything changed. He started drinking, getting angry over little things, pushing me, then hitting me." "I'm sorry," Elijah said. "I stayed longer than I should have, kept thinking he'd change, and that the man I married would come back. But when the girls were 3 and he raised his hand to Ruby for spilling juice, she shook her head. I packed our things that night, filed for divorce, got a restraining order. Haven't seen him in 5 years. Last I heard, he's in prison in Arizona for assault. The girls are lucky to have you." "They're lucky to have you right now, too," Angela replied softly. "I don't know what we would have done if they'd knocked on a different door that night." That thought haunted Elijah sometimes. What if the twins had picked a different house? What if no one had answered? What if he'd been too lost in his grief to help? But they hadn't. They'd chosen his door. And somehow, impossibly, these 3 broken people had found each other. As October turned to November, and November to December, the routine deepened into something more, something that felt almost like family. Elijah returned to work at Lou's Auto Repair. His boss, a kind man with a salt and pepper beard and a patient demeanor, welcomed him back with a firm handshake and no questions asked. "Good to have you back, Reed. Take it one day at a time." The work helped. The familiar smell of motor oil and metal. The straightforward problems with straightforward solutions. A broken alternator, a leaking radiator, things that could be fixed. He'd pick up the twins after school, and they'd do homework at the kitchen table while he made dinner. Real dinners now, not just frozen meals. Spaghetti, tacos, chicken and rice. The girls would chatter about their day, about the boy who ate glue, about the spelling test Nora aced, about Ruby's drawing that got hung up in the classroom. Life. The house was full of life again. They visited Angela 3 times a week now. She was transferred to a rehabilitation facility after the hospital, learning to walk without pain, to breathe deeply without her ribs screaming. The bruises had faded to nothing. Her face was healing, though a scar above her left eyebrow would remain. "Battle scar," she joked at the twins. "Makes me look tough." And during those visits, something else was happening too. something neither Elijah nor Angela had expected or looked for. Small moments that added up. The way Angela asked about his day and actually listened to the answer. The way Elijah brought her books from the library because she mentioned being bored. The way they'd catch each other's eyes when one of the twins said something funny, sharing a private smile. The way Elijah's hand would brush Angela's when they both reached to help Nora tie her shoe. And neither would pull away quite as fast as they should. The way Angela's expression softened when Elijah talked about Connor. Grief, recognizing grief. The way Elijah felt something warm bloom in his chest when Angela laughed. Really laughed for the first time since she'd known her. It terrified him. He hadn't thought he'd ever feel anything like this again. Hadn't wanted to. Loving someone meant risking loss, and he'd already lost everything. But Angela was different. She understood pain in a way most people didn't. Understood sacrifice. Understood what it meant to rebuild yourself from ruins. In mid-December, 3 months after that rainy October night, Angela was finally discharged from the rehabilitation facility. Brenda Hayes, the social worker, met them at Elijah's house to discuss next steps. Angela's sister in New Mexico is still willing to take you all in, Brenda said, reviewing her notes. She has a 3-bedroom house and a spare room. The girls could start fresh there. New school, new start. Elijah felt his stomach drop. Of course, this had always been temporary. He'd known that. What do you want to do? He asked Angela, trying to keep his voice neutral. Angela looked at her daughters who were sitting on the couch watching this conversation with wide eyes. Then she looked at Elijah. The girls are settled here, she said slowly. They have friends at school. They're doing well. And she hesitated. I don't want to uproot them again. Not right now. Where will you stay? Brenda asked practically. The question hung in the air. Angela had no apartment, no savings, no immediate options. I have a spare room. Elijah heard himself say, just until you get back on your feet. Find a job. Save up for a place. Angela's eyes widened. Elijah, you've already done so much. The girls are happy here. And honestly, his voice caught. This house hasn't felt this alive in a long time. Please stay. Brenda Hayes made notes, ran background checks, filed paperwork. Within a week, Angela moved into the spare room at the house on Sycamore Grove, and the household of 4 found its new rhythm. Angela started working part-time at the grocery store on Morrison Avenue, saving every penny. Elijah worked at the shop. The twins went to school. They had family dinners, movie nights, homework sessions. From the outside, they looked like a normal family. On the inside, something more complicated was happening. Angela made coffee every morning exactly the way Elijah liked it. Strong, black, no sugar, without ever asking. Elijah always saved the corner piece of lasagna for Angela because he'd noticed it was her favorite. They developed a dinner routine. He would cook, she would set the table, the twins would clear dishes, and they'd wash up together side by side at the sink. And during those quiet moments, washing dishes while the girls watched TV in the other room, they'd talk about their days, about their fears, about their hopes, about healing. Do you think about Connor every day? Angela asked one night in January, handing him a plate to dry. Every day, Elijah admitted, but it's different now. It doesn't feel like drowning anymore. It feels like remembering, honoring. Does that make sense? Perfect sense, Angela said softly. The girls ask about their father sometimes. Not often, but when they do, I try to remember the good parts. The man I thought I married before everything went wrong. There were good parts? Elijah asked gently. A few? Angela said. Mostly I remember how hard I fought to protect them from him, and then from poverty, and then from those men. I keep thinking, when does it get easier? When do I stop having to fight? Maybe that's just what parents do. We fight for our kids always. Even when they're gone, Angela asked, then immediately looked horrified. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have even then, Elijah said firmly. I fight to keep Connor's memory alive, to be the man he'd be proud of. That's still fighting for him in a way. Angela smiled, and something in Elijah's chest squeezed tight. The first time Elijah really acknowledged what he was feeling was on a Tuesday in February, 6 months after that rainy October night. They were washing dishes again, their routine now. The twins were upstairs getting ready for bed. The radio played softly in the background. And Angela was telling him about a difficult customer at the grocery store, making funny voices, making her laugh. And Elijah looked at her, really looked at her, at the scar above her eyebrow that she'd turned into a point of pride, at the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled, at the strength in her hands as she scrubbed a pot, at the life she'd brought back into his house. "I think I'm falling for you," he said. The words came out before he could stop them. Angela froze, the dish towel in her hands. "What?" she breathed. "I'm falling for you," Elijah repeated, his heart hammering. "I know it's complicated. I know we both have baggage. I know this might be the worst timing in the world. But I had to tell you, because the thought of you moving out, of not seeing you every day, of not having these moments." He gestured at the sink, the dishes, the simple domesticity of it all. "It's unbearable." Angela sat down the towel, turning to face him fully. Her eyes were shining. "I've been falling for you since the day you sat beside my hospital bed and told me I was a good mother," she said softly. "When everyone else in my life was either pitying me or judging me, you just saw me, saw my love for my daughters, saw that I'd done my best, even when my best led to disaster. Angela, she gave me back my life. Elijah, you gave my daughters a home. You gave us all a second chance when I thought we'd used up all our chances." Elijah stepped closer. "I was drowning before you all came into my life, going through the motions, waiting to die. Basically, you didn't just save me. You made me want to live again." "We saved each other," Angela whispered. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative. Two broken people learning to trust again, learning that maybe, just maybe, the heart had more capacity for love than they thought possible. When they pulled apart, Angela was smiling, really smiling. "The girls are going to lose their minds," she said. "Is that a good thing?" Elijah asked nervously. "Are you kidding? They've been asking me when you're going to be their dad for the past month." Elijah laughed, really laughed for the first time in 6 months. Over the next year, they built a family, not to replace what they lost. Connor would always be part of Elijah's heart, always present in the photos on the walls and the stories they told. Angela would always carry the scars of her past, the battles she'd fought, but they created something new and beautiful from the ashes. The twins thrived. Nora discovered a love for science, constantly asking questions about how things worked. Ruby became the artist, covering their refrigerator with drawings of their family, 4 stick figures holding hands, a house with a red door, a son that always smiled. Angela got promoted to assistant manager at the grocery store. Elijah started teaching auto repair classes at the community college on weekends, finding purpose and passing on his knowledge. They had family dinners and movie nights. They argued about whose turn it was to do laundry. They attended parent-teacher conferences together. They were beautifully, messily, perfectly ordinary. On a crisp October evening, exactly 1 year after that rainy night, when 2 terrified little girls had knocked on his door, Elijah gathered all 3 of them in the living room. Nora and Ruby sat on the couch, their eyes curious. Angela stood beside them, her hand resting on Ruby's shoulder. "I have something I want to ask you all," Elijah said, his heart racing. He got down on one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. The twins gasped. "Angela Torres," Elijah began, his voice shaking slightly. "You walked into my life on the worst night imaginable, and somehow you brought light back into the darkness. You're strong and fierce and kind. You're an incredible mother, and I love you." Angela's hand flew to her mouth, tears already streaming down her face. "But this isn't just about us," Elijah continued, looking at Nora and Ruby. "This is about all 4 of us. So I'm asking all 3 of you, will you be my family? Will you let me be not just a man you live with, but your family forever?" "Yes," the twins screamed simultaneously, launching themselves off the couch and tackling Elijah in a hug that sent them all tumbling to the floor. Angela was laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes," she managed. "Yes, yes, yes." The ring, simple silver with a small diamond, fit perfectly. They were married the following spring in a small ceremony at the courthouse. Nora and Ruby wore matching blue dresses and served as flower girls, taking their job very seriously. Lou from the auto shop served as best man, standing beside Elijah with a proud smile. Angela wore a simple white dress she'd found at a consignment shop, and when she walked toward Elijah, his eyes filled with tears. Not tears of grief this time, but of joy, of gratitude, of hope. "I do," they both said, promises made to each other and to the family they'd built from broken pieces. That evening, they sat together on the porch of their house, not just Elijah's house anymore, but their home, watching Nora and Ruby chase fireflies in the yard. The spring air was warm, carrying the scent of the lilacs Angela had planted in the garden. "Do you ever think about that night?" Angela asked, leaning her head on Elijah's shoulder. "What would have happened if the girls had knocked on a different door?" Elijah wrapped his arm around his wife, watching their daughters play. "I think Connor sent them to us," he said softly. "All three of you. He knew I needed saving just as much as you did." "We saved each other," Angela whispered, repeating the words that had become their truth. And it was true. The knock on the door that rainy October night had brought together 4 broken souls, a grieving father, a desperate mother, and 2 terrified little girls. And somehow, impossibly, they'd healed each other. Elijah still visited Connor's grave every Sunday, but now he brought Angela and the twins with him. They'd leave flowers, usually dandelions, that the girls picked from the yard, and tell Connor stories about their week, about Nora's science project on volcanoes, about Ruby's drawing that won a contest at school, about family dinners and movie nights, and the ordinary, beautiful moments that made up a life. "We miss you," Elijah would say each time, "but you'd love your sisters. They're amazing." Because that's what they were now. Nora and Ruby were Connor's sisters, connected not by blood, but by the love that had brought their families together. The abandoned factory on Ashford Street was eventually torn down, replaced by a community center that offered services to families in crisis. Job training, financial counseling, emergency assistance. Elijah and Angela both volunteered there on weekends, helping other families find the resources they needed, paying forward the second chance they'd been given. One family they helped was a single father whose wife had died of cancer, leaving him alone with 3 young kids. Elijah sat with him in the community center's quiet room, listening to his grief, offering no platitudes, just presence. "I don't know how to do this," the man said, his voice breaking. "I don't know how to be enough for them." "You are already enough," Elijah said gently, "just by being here, just by trying. The rest, it comes one day at a time, and you don't have to do it alone." He'd learned that lesson himself, that healing wasn't something you did in isolation, that sometimes the people who needed saving became the ones who saved you. That family wasn't always about blood. Sometimes it was about who showed up when everything fell apart. On quiet nights when the twins were asleep and the house was peaceful, Elijah would sometimes stand in the doorway of their room. Nora and Ruby still slept in the same bed most nights, still holding hands the way they had that first terrifying evening. Angela would come up behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "Thank you for answering the door," she'd whisper. "Thank you for knocking," he'd reply. And in that house on Sycamore Grove, where grief had once lived alone, love had built a home filled with laughter and homework and dinner conversations, with Friday movie nights and Sunday cemetery visits, with scraped knees and science projects and artwork on the refrigerator, with all the messy, ordinary, extraordinary moments that made up a family. Not the family any of them had planned for, but the family they'd needed all along. The knock that changed everything had come on a rain-soaked October night, delivered by 2 8-year-old girls in bare feet and pajamas, carrying a message of desperation that became a doorway to redemption. And Elijah Reed, who'd thought the best parts of him had died with his son, learned that the heart's capacity for love was far greater than he had ever imagined. That grief and joy could coexist, that endings could become beginnings, that sometimes when you're at your lowest, life sends you exactly what you need if you're brave enough to answer the door. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Sometimes the reminder that second chances exist is exactly what someone needs to hear. And don't forget to subscribe. We share stories like this every week. Stories that remind us that even in our darkest moments, light can find a way.